Detective recap here. Today, I'm going to explain a drama film called The Poker House, which is about the early life of the director of the film, Lori Petty, in a gritty and gang-infested neighborhood. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In 1976 in Council Bluffs, Iowa, there is a place called the Poker House. It's an ordinary-looking house situated in an ordinary-looking neighborhood. However, within the four walls of the house, neighborhood pimps and criminals gather to play poker and enlist the services of escorts. The owner of the house is an escort herself who was coerced into that kind of life. Her name is Sarah, and she has 3 daughters, the 14-year-old Agnes, the 12-year-old Bea, and the 8-year-old Cami. One morning, Agnes comes home to their dilapidated home only to find a young man exiting their bathroom in his underwear. It would be a lie to say that Agnes is at all surprised by this. To her, this is just another morning. Several men come into their house every day then leave the next morning after a night of hooking up. Agnes convinces the man to leave their house and even helps him get dressed. The man complies with Agnes's demands and quietly leaves the house. Agnes is now once again left in the cluttered living room, scouring for something to eat. She barely bothers cleaning up, knowing that there's little hope for their house to ever be set right. Before the sun rises, she rolls up the stack of newspapers on the floor, binding them each with a rubber band. She then goes to wake up her little sister, Bea. As young as Agnes is, she knows that she's the only hope that her sisters have. She stands as their pillar of strength. Amidst the confusion and the harshness of it all, Agnes looks after Bea and Cami. Agnes knocks on her door, and Bea goes to prepare for her usual routine. The 2 sisters sit on the floor and gather the rolled up bundles of newspapers. They put the rolls in the pouch that Bea's wearing. When Agnes asks where their youngest sister is, Bea replies that Cami's at her friend Sheila's place. Apparently Sheila's mother has tried to ban Cami from home, considering that she has enough children of her own to feed. But there would be times when Sheila's mother is too tired to kick her out, especially after coming home from her second job. Though Agnes reasons that Cami's tiny and doesn't take up much room, Bea explains that she eats up all their food. To Agnes, this is a good thing for Cami since she might grow that way. Agnes talks with Bea some more until it's time for Bea to leave the house to deliver newspapers in the neighborhood. Before Bea leaves, Agnes asks if she could make her an improvised version of mac and cheese using nacho cheese Doritos. After hearing what Agnes had in her mind, Bea sternly rejects her idea. Their inability to make a decent plate of food speaks to the children's lack of guidance and resources. Agnes is keenly aware of this. She must have been thinking of this when she thought of Cami eating plenty at her friend's house. Bea goes on to deliver the rolled up newspapers while Agnes puts on a vinyl record, listening to a bass-heavy track while preparing for a bath. While Agnes is getting ready to take a bath, she spots a tiny mouse on the bathroom sink. She takes a small paper bag and places the mouse inside before gently pushing it outside the window. Though she has every reason to be spiteful and resentful towards the world, Agnes maintains her kindness, and this extends even to small animals. Agnes then takes a moment alone to enjoy a serene bath in the tub. Moments later, Agnes is visited by a man wearing a fedora. This is Duval, her mother's pimp. Duval plops down his gun along with a burger on the table for Agnes as he goes on to flirt with her. Agnes muses that Duval had kissed her a week before, and her excitement upon seeing him again is evident. Duval announces that he won in a card game nearby and flaunts his cash in front of her. They share a kiss once again, delighting the naive young girl. In turn, she excitedly reports to Duval that she has a basketball competition coming up that day. Duval asks Agnes if she loves him, to which she answers yes. At this point, Agnes tells Duval about the man from earlier. Realizing that Sarah had a customer without his knowledge, Duval gets up in a rage and goes to beat Sarah. The young Agnes takes Duval's gun and poises it towards him in the other room. She thinks about how she doesn't want any part of Duval beating up Sarah, but she does like it when Duval kisses her. Before Duval notices the gun, Agnes places it back onto the table. After seeing her mother get beaten up, Agnes changes her tone with Duval and refuses to eat the burger that he brought for her. Any adult would find it plain to see that Duval doesn't actually love Agnes and that he has no business making out with a literal child. But Agnes isn't an adult. Agnes, through her young and innocent eyes, sees Duval for much more than what he is. Cami wakes up at the Hightower residence, where several siblings run around in a blur in the perpetually loud house. Cami's friend, Sheila, tells her that she has to leave and go home. Obliging, Cami leaves the house with Mr. Hightower. Cami and Mr. Hightower have gotten close over time to the point that Cami tells Mr. Hightower that she wishes that he were her dad. The kind Mr. Hightower takes Cami to breakfast at a bar before going to work. However, he receives an urgent call from work, forcing him to leave Cami behind. Eventually, Sarah wakes up from her drunken sleep and stumbles outward to the living room, where Agnes is doing her homework. Anger grows in Sarah's voice, with the woman becoming more and more frustrated when she can't find what she's looking for in the living room. To this, Agnes says that she cleaned up the living room after seeing it so messy. Upon hearing that, Sarah gets mad at Agnes, saying that she wants to be able to put whatever she wants wherever she feels like it. This leads to Agnes feeling overwhelmed by her fussy and unsavory mother. Sarah then teases and forces Agnes to start being a call girl herself so that their family could earn more money. When she hears this, Agnes is pushed to the verge of tears, but Sarah only teases her further, saying that she won't be 14 forever. Despite Agnes's attempts at having a semblance of an orderly life, her mother shows no appreciation of this. She's even mad about it. To Agnes, it feels as if her efforts are in vain. But more than that, it feels as if her mother wants them to keep living in such a dismal state. Most heartbreaking of all, her mother wants her to be a call girl. This is devastating, especially when most mothers would struggle against continence to keep their children safe and to keep them away from such a tragic life. At this point, Agnes recounts their life before, back when things weren't as messed up. Agnes and her sisters used to live with Sarah and their father. Their father was a preacher, so the three girls were much in tune with religion. However, their father was abusive towards them, physically hurting both his children and his wife. Eventually, the police came for their father, and the four of them escaped to where they are now. After that, Agnes still attempted to connect with God, but her faith waned over the long and difficult years. Meanwhile, Bea is almost done with her delivery run and is now collecting empty bottles for some extra cash. She then visits some local hobos who are well acquainted with her. While waiting for the local general store to open, Bea tells the hobos that she's going to be moving soon and that she is child services helping her get to a foster home. When the store owner comes in, Bea and the hobos present their empty bottles for the owner to buy from them. Bea uses the cash to buy some candy that she could enjoy for herself. At this time, Agnes escapes to her room, where several posters of soul musicians are plastered all over the walls while Cammy is still at the bar, chatting with the bar owner, Dolly, and the rather delirious alcoholic, Stymie. While their home life may be in shambles, this doesn't stop the three sisters from getting along well with their neighbors. Though they're surrounded by the seediest people in the poker house, they're all still innocent, and they yearn for a better life. This is especially evident with Bea, who's trying to get into a foster home, and in Cammy, who longs to be a part of the Hightower family. Before leaving the house for the day, Agnes writes a poem expressing her frustrations with her father and religion. The poem reads, "Never called nobody father. Why bother? When you left, you took God with you. Never met no preacher who wasn't trying to reach her, selling heaven, taking your sin home with him. Saw some funny hats though when they made the new pope, giving the sheep hope. Never called nobody father. Why bother? Ain't no reverence, anyway. Revered ones pimpin' the little ones who need God to be true. Ain't no end to what they'll do. When you leave, take God with you." This poem revolves around the rejection of patriarchal figures. These figures include the church, which is a response to Agnes's disillusionment with her father together with the religion that he taught her. After writing this down in her blue notebook, Agnes leaves the house on her bike. She stumbles upon Bea, who's eating candy nearby. Agnes takes this opportunity to give her little sister a scare. With Bea spooked and flustered by her little prank, Agnes tells her to run home. Though Agnes continually and playfully teases her sister, she sincerely tells Bea that she loves her before leaving. Agnes then heads to the local paper, where she claims a check for her poetry submissions. As she's practically an honorary employee there, Agnes is friendly towards all the employees. She then hands in her school report card to the head of the paper, who is impressed by her stellar grades. Afterward, Agnes drops by a restaurant where she works to pick up another check. Once she has her check, she goes for a quick game of basketball with the neighborhood kids. It's made apparent that Agnes is quite popular with everyone in town. But aside from being a kind and well-liked girl, she's also multifaceted and multi-talented. This gives the sense that if she really wanted to, Agnes most definitely has the potential and the talent to break free from this sordid town. Meanwhile, Cammy becomes increasingly frustrated. She's been abandoned in a bar that she's unfamiliar with, and she wishes for someone to just come and pick her up. That evening, Bea is practicing her saxophone in her room up until things start to stir at the poker house. By the time that Agnes got home, the debauchery's already well underway. She sees their house filled with the all too familiar characters that populate their home every single night: call girls, pimps, criminals. Then, sleeping in the back room is her 12-year-old sister, Bea. Agnes goes to Bea first by going up the window to her room. When she gets there, she tells Bea to visit Kelly's house that night, even though she doesn't have band practice. Without understanding why Bea does as she's told. With her sister gone, Agnes lights a cigarette and braces herself to enter the living room, the melting pot of a crummy, backwater life. Once she goes into the living room, someone hits on her despite Agnes's young age. Meanwhile, Duval has just won a game of cards by cheating, but none of his friends could protest because he brings out his gun every time someone says something against him. It's hard not to feel for Agnes because her love for her sisters is on full display here. She understands what goes on in that house, and she attempts to keep these dangers from reaching her sisters. Though this means that she has to be the one to dive headfirst into the darkness, she is willing to do it to protect her sister's innocence. Eventually, Agnes runs into Duval in the kitchen. When no one is looking, Duval kisses Agnes, and she kisses him back. Blissfully unknowing, Agnes is flustered by Duval's kisses again, thinking that they're a genuine display of affection. Suddenly, someone else enters the kitchen, and the two of them break it off. Later that night, when it's just Duval and Agnes in the sordid living room, they continue kissing each other. Agnes remains delighted by Duval's kisses as she keeps thinking that he loves her. But soon enough, the girl is brought down to a harsh reality when Duval suddenly takes advantage of her body. Immediately after the horrid act, Agnes panics and rushes into the bathtub. Distraught, Agnes is in shock after having such a despicable thing done to her, and she panics over getting pregnant. She then turns on the water in the tub while blood gushes out of her. Suddenly, a drunken Sarah comes into the bathroom. She asks Agnes what she was doing without the faintest glimmer of concern. Crushed and devastated, the young girl reaches out for her mother to come and embrace her. Without even acknowledging her daughter's unmistakable cry for help, Sarah only gives her some errands to do. Poor Agnes just closes her arms and embraces herself instead. If there's anyone to be held responsible for the three sisters' lives, it would be their mother, Sarah. But as it stands, Sarah is too consumed by her obsession with Duval and the drugs in her veins. And when she needed her mother the most, all Agnes could feel from Sarah is her emotional coldness and indifference. Sarah recounts a story from when Agnes was a baby. Even at a very young age, all Agnes wanted was for her mother to read a book to her. She mentions a red book that Agnes liked, and she tells Agnes that she had asked her to read that book so many times that she began to grow sick of it. So Sarah made up her own stories while she was reading the book over and over again. However, Sarah remarks that she could never fool Agnes and that she always knew what her mother was trying to do even when she was young. The drunken Sarah leaves the room, never noticing her daughter's disturbed state. This telling display gives the sense that Sarah has some level of awareness of what she's doing to her daughters. The recounting of Agnes's early life indicates that Sarah knows that she can't fool Agnes into living a life that she doesn't want. No matter what she says, the truth will surface and Agnes will come to understand it. Moments later, Agnes barges into the kitchen with Duval's pistol in hand. She overhears Duval telling Sarah that he wants to start selling Agnes, so Agnes points the gun at him. Shooting the gun once, Agnes warns Duval not to move. For all of Duval's smugness, he changes his tone when the shot nearly hits him, and he realizes that Agnes is making a serious threat. But Sarah would step in the line of fire, protecting Duval from Agnes. This only enrages Agnes, so she tells her that Duval had just taken advantage of her. But Sarah refuses to acknowledge what her daughter just said, and she even defends Duval, asserting that he takes care of her. The realization that her mother is a lost cause comes, and Agnes could only say that she'll be leaving. To this, Sarah responds by telling her not to come back to her house anymore. With that, Agnes goes out the door. Agnes heads straight to her basketball game at Ridgeview High. The game is already in the second half and their team's down by 13 points. While she's still upset over what happened at home, her spirits are lifted when she sees all the friends she's made watching and cheering her on. From the local paper employees to the kids she played basketball with, to her coworkers at the restaurant, and more, they're all rooting for her. Amidst the miserable hellscape that swallowed Agnes's day whole, she's still not alone. The love and respect she doesn't receive at home, she finds in the people who she cares for and in turn, care for her. It says a lot about Agnes that she's able to earn the affection and support of those around her. In the next half of the game, Agnes single-handedly brings her team from the brink of defeat to a tied game of 60 points each, a feat never before seen in the school's history. During the final 4 seconds of the game, the superstar Agnes shoots the ball just in time to score an additional 2 points, finally securing their team's victory. That night, Agnes has broken a state record for having scored 27 points in under 7 minutes. Marching out of the school gym, Agnes proceeds straight to her car. Despite her victory, the horrors from earlier continue to plague the traumatized girl, and she goes through a nervous breakdown. She eventually recovers, and Agnes pushes forward, driving now in search of her sisters. She finds them by a bridge looking down near the edge, so she tells them to come inside the car. Finally, the sisters are reunited after a long and difficult day. She plans on taking out B and Cammy to dinner in celebration of her victorious basketball game. After inserting a tape into the car's player, the three jam out to the song, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. The sisters take turns in singing the parts of the song as they ride out into the night. Despite everything, Agnes takes solace in the one redeeming aspect of her life, her sisters. Eventually, Agnes leaves Iowa for New York City to become an artist. 20 years later, Agnes, or Lori Petty, wrote and directed this very film. In a way, the story concludes with an anticlimactic ending. It's natural to yearn for a bombastically triumphant conclusion each time there's a story of hardship and heartbreak. But ultimately, The Poker House is a real-life story. And in real life, things don't always end in a neatly tied bow. We don't get to see exactly how Agnes and her sisters break free from their unsettling world, but in the final minutes of the film, we do get reassurance that things will turn out okay for the family. More than that, this is less of a fully fleshed tale but more of a portrait of what it was like for director and actress Lori Petty growing up in that world. It's a very personal film, but at the same time, it carries universal appeal as it gives voice to young girls everywhere who find themselves in a similarly deplorable situation, as well as the trauma of being taken advantage of by cruel men. Overall, the film is a beautiful take on how three young girls refuse to yield their hearts and spirits to a dreadful world and how they overcome this darkness by finding strength in each other. And this sentiment is displayed through the scene's final song sequence. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.